Welcome to the first in a series of cultural conversations brought to you by the Costume Designers Guild Diversity Committee. My name is Philip Boutte, and I will be your moderator for the panel featuring a very talented group of costume designers that you see before you here. Smile, everybody. Our world's changing, ever evolving. The current human condition is that of social change. That's been a huge thing that we're all experiencing right now. So long outstanding conversations are finally starting to be had. People are listening, but more important thing is that, you know, what do they have to say, or what are we trying to say? I think that was the main goal of having these conversations. And so I want to get into what people have to say. But first I want to just give you guys a little introduction to our panelists. So we have Sharon Davis, Academy Award CDG nominee. Credits include HBO's Watchmen, Westworld, The Help, Dreamgirls, Ray, and I had to throw this in for myself, 7. Everybody give her a round of applause. Antoinette Messam has done Orphan, Creed, Hold the Dark, and Superfly. Round of applause. Charlize Antoinette, Judas and the Black Messiah. If you guys have seen that trailer, it's amazing. Just came out. Raising Dion, See You Yesterday, The Inevitable Defeat of Mr. and Pete. And we have, round of applause, we have Gersha Phillips, 3 seasons of Star Trek Discovery, Miles Ahead, Mortal Instruments of City and Bones, and Life. And Deirdre Govin, L Word Generation Q, Tracy Oliver's First Wives Club, Sorry to Bother You, and The Sun is Also a Star. Round of applause for her. So now that we're familiar with everyone, I'd like to start out with a series of questions that speak to broadening the scope of understanding nuances and the experiences of Black women living through a moment of cultural shift within the world, but specifically the workplace. So our first question, or let's start that out, would be, let's start by defining the topic of diversity. So I want you guys to define what it means to you and how you feel your role as a costume designer plays in this area.
Diversity always means to me is everyone of color and everybody, and having equal rights to anybody, no matter what color or, the whole, or what their sexual preferences, or, everyone we should be able to work in that kind of harmonious situation. Number one, because the more diverse a crew is, the more you're able to understand and learn about that person's culture or sexual preference or whatever, and you have a broader understanding. And that also may help in future films that you are going to design. So I'm just going to start lightly with that's my answer.
That is very helpful. Do anybody else want to take that question as well?
I'll add to it. I agree that diversity is, encompassing people of different races and sexual preferences. But I wanted to also add that I recently worked in the most diverse department I've ever worked in. And it's partially because I was able to, be a part of the hiring as a department head and do a lot of the hiring. And I truly believe that, and it was on Judas and the Black Messiah. And I truly believe that that movie came out so well because of the diverse viewpoints of everyone in the department and the diverse skill sets and everyone's diverse background. I had people from, 3 different generations working under me, and that was amazing. And I've never had that experience before. I had people of, various races working with me. And a lot of times, I'm in departments that are exclusively one race. And, and I personally just thrive better in environments where a lot of different kinds of people who have different backgrounds are able to collaborate. I think it's a beautiful thing. But, on the flip side of that, as a Black costume designer, I do feel the need to help, other Black people and people of color get into the costume world because, there's just not a lot of representation of us, in these departments, below the line. There's not a lot of representation across the board. So I do feel it is my responsibility to help others get into the industry.
So now I think that that's really useful because I think a lot of the times we are also trying to elevate our crews, right? We're trying to make sure that everybody feels welcome, but it is important to have that diverse and kind of that the opinions of others, because we all catch different things, right? So I think that another question that I wanted to kind of leading directly, into thinking about diversity would be, do you feel that the role that you play in diversity is solely based on the specific project or by the world we live in today? Go ahead, Gersha.
Yeah, I think it's on everything. I mean, I think what you bring to the project when you, as a designer, is, not only your life experiences, but also, whatever is going on in the world. All of those things feed and help our creative journey and what we're doing in terms of telling the story. So I think all of those things encompass together help us do what we do and help us do it better. Perfect.
Anybody else want to take that question, or did you have? Go ahead, Deidre.
I agree. I'll second that. I feel someone taught me very early on how important it was to explore your cognitive world. I feel my life, my experiences, my travels, being a citizen of the world, a global traveler, it has informed my design process immensely. It informs how I think, how I create, how I see. I sit in a place to where I'm a sponge. Everything that I see and do and experiences and the people that I meet and the cultures that I interact with, even when I am not just being a traveler, I'm actually living the environment. It really speaks to me. And I have been very fortunate and blessed to have lived and traveled in over 27 odd countries. So my recall when I get projects and I read scripts automatically refers to that. And I feel that is something that's very paramount to my design process.
I think that's something to just kind of be aware of too, for those of you that are watching when you're thinking about that, is that she just touched on a really important part just of terms of creativity for all of us in general. I think that one of the things that I know creatively for me, just in terms of being in different departments, has been travel and life experience. It's just hands down one of the best things to fuel your inspiration. And I often find that when we feel challenged in those areas, either we're not diverse enough, meaning we don't have enough perspective around us, or you've stopped learning. So you end up stop learning. And whenever you feel stuck, it's probably, especially in your inspiration, it's because you somehow stopped learning or stopped taking in information. So it's good to talk about that as well. Go ahead, Antoinette.
Piggybacking on that, it just leads to the difference between how you approach diversity where you're working, and what diversity means to me working in Canada or Morocco as compared to working in the US. And I find that it's culturally the makeup of the community sometimes speak to that. You can't always have as diverse a crew or a production when that's not available. But if the people who you're working with are open to understanding that the conversations have to be had. And I'm not speaking specifically to whether it's a film about people of color or Black or, Indian, but the point being is they have to be comfortable having the cultural conversations wherever they are. And that is something that I'm seeing a lot more of, is all of a sudden it's like, oh, let me take the blinkers off. I'm not in my bubble anymore, and we're now in a foreign place, and we have to be sensitive to the cultural differences in the words we use and what diversity means to this community as compared to Los Angeles.
Correct. But I think when you guys talk about this, or when you're talking about that, even just traveling and stuff like that, one of the things that I wanted to kind of highlight is, do you guys feel I guess in overall content of the projects that we're contributing to, in terms of even just traveling around and being a part of different crews, in linking back diversity with the crews you're working with in different places, how important is it to have the crew, not just your crew, but the above the line? So like showrunners, studio execs, producers, directors, how important is it to have those people also be diverse? Go ahead, Sharon.
On my first design film, which was in 1992, it was called Equinox. The director was Alan Rudolph. This is my first design film, mind you. And I walked on the set, and the first and the second AD were Black. The mixer was Japanese. The boom was a Latino. I mean, the still photographer was a woman, And I thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to love this career. Because I thought this is how it's always going to be, this diverse. But the flavor and the textures, I mean, it was amazing. I mean, they played, the sound guy played amazing music. I mean, it was very artistic and cultural. I mean, this is, I guess, the world of art house film. So, but I was hoping, my next film would be, I thought, oh, they're all going to be like this. This is great. It's I feel like you can thrive creatively in this kind of environment. You feel like everybody's here, like the world is with you. And I too have been raised in a lot of different countries, so this was extremely comfortable for me.
Do you feel as though as we've gone along, it's shifted and changed, or do you feel about the same as you did?
It has completely shifted and changed. And now it's a little more it's as opposed to it being naturally happening, it's forced. And that is not comfortable. And sometimes when it's forced, I feel like some of the directors or producers feel a little angst that they have to hire this way. And I have noticed that it has not been so. I feel the last couple of years I've been a little more stressed than usual, or a little more, I've not been as comfortable. Let's just put it that way.
Does anyone want to, I actually want to add that in. Does anybody want to speak to that? Because I know that I've had the experience even with myself with just kind of being on a project, and I hear like we're making up characters. So these characters can be anything. And you hear people, like having a conversation or like, oh, this would be a really good place for a diversity hire. And I go, like, there's some part of me that just immediately cringes about that. Like, so go ahead, Antoinette.
I'm living that right now, so it really speak to it. And Gersh and I come from growing in Canada in film, where it's a diverse crew to begin with. It's a diverse in ethnicities, not black and white, and as well as with the above the line, So when I'm now here working on a Black film, and when I say here in America working on a Black film, and we're being told you have to make sure you get, this is a Black film that you represent, you get your Black crew. And I'm like, well, I can only hire them if they're available, especially if you're asking me to hire them locally. But the pressure is not coming from my Black producer or Black director, because they want to make the best film possible. But there's now, I'm feeling, when I say now, like Sharon, the energy has shifted of the produce above the line, feeling this pressure that they have to make sure they get the balance, or how many Black people do you have in your department? I've actually been asked that. Or I've said, I've hired my supervisor. Oh, are they Black? And I'm like, no, right at this moment for this project, they're the best person for the job. And would I like to hire someone who is Black or a person of color, that if I can give them an opportunity? Absolutely. But all of a sudden, especially with this particular project, based on who some of our above the line is this need, this frenzy of hiring as much as you can. And I'm like, hold on, I'm having a hard enough time finding experienced people, much less being pressured to, every time I say we found someone, being asked what race they are. And I have to admit, this is the first time in 20 plus years of working, internationally, that I'm being asked this question so specifically.
Got it. Anybody else want to speak to that too? Or are you experiencing something similar?
I just wanted to jump in and speak about like the flip side of that. Like, for most of my career, as a shopper or an ACD, I've been the only Black woman and person of color, sometimes on set and oftentimes in the costume department. And I think the issue is that there's not as much pressure put on other productions to do that same thing. You know, there's not a call in, you know, most productions on most TV shows or movies to try to have a diverse crew. Like, the crews can be largely white for the most part. So, you know, there's not a good pipeline, you know, for training and developing Black people and people of color. So that's why it feels like there's a lot of pressure, you know, when we are on projects and we want to hire Black people and people of color. They're all booked because everyone who is working and in the union is amazing and they're working. You know, it's just not enough talent. And that I think is like the real issue. You know, it's not that we need to be pressured to hire people that are Black or people of color. No, we need to find ways to train Black people, to train people of color, you know, so that they can work in this industry below the line and be successful. Because, you know, I personally had an experience where I was able to get like 5 people into the union because I was on a show that flipped. And all the people were young people of color, young Black people, Latino people, and they were able to get into the union. And a lot of them had tried, you know, to get in the union and couldn't get hired on projects. And so they lost their days and had to start over, you know? So that happens a lot. There's just no support, you know, so that when Antoinette is asked to hire, you know, more Black people or people of color, there's just not enough people.
Go ahead, Antoinette, and then Gersha.
Sorry, I just want to clarify that it's not, what I'm trying to say is I don't want to be forced to hire people for the wrong reasons who may not be ready. I'm 100% behind you on the training and given opportunities. And, you know, I mean, I'm doing it right now. Someone's not experienced enough to be a key, but I've asked that we bring her into the department to shadow and work with the key for a few weeks so that they learn. And we had to create that position, and I'm able to on this show. But what I was getting for the first time is a almost pressure to hire to make it look like they are hitting their check boxes, as compared to, why don't we figure out if we can on this show have some type of training or internship or mentorship program specific for this film, if that is so important for you, to make sure you have 30% in every department. And you're speaking to a person who's used to being the only Black person on the entire crew, you know? But I don't want to hire someone who's not ready for the job because they haven't had the opportunity to learn. Let's figure out how to train them and give them that opportunity. So I just wanted to be clear that I'm not wanting to not hire people of color. I just want not to hire because it's the trend this week. Let's make sure we get all the Black people on the show. No, let me help me figure out how to train some of these people. Peace out.
Go ahead, Gersha.
Yeah, I was just actually going to say what Antoinette said, that, you know, I prefer to be on a show where it happens naturally, you know, that you're not being asked or forced to do it, which I think is really important. But I do realize that there aren't enough Black crew in our unions on sets, et cetera. So I think that the idea of, you know, asking if there can create a training position or a training program within shows like Antoinette's doing and our show, other shows, I think it would be a great idea.
I think one of the things that I wanted to ask as we move forward in this is, because you guys brought up training and we've defined diversity as being this kind of like topic that we need to talk about. What are the tools that you feel are needed, and who do you feel needs the support? So we were kind of talking about that now, but what tools do you guys feel like are going to be useful in order to make more of that happen? Go ahead, Gersha.
Well, for instance, we do have PAs in our department, but we're not really allowed to train them. I think that's a really big thing in the States, and it's also a thing in Canada. So in the costume department, we don't actually have a training position. And I think that's something that should be added to our department so we can actually train people. Because one of the other things that people are complaining about or saying is that people are coming into our industry, they're not trained properly, they don't know what they're doing, all of these sorts of things. And I think it's really important that we start to nurture some of this new talent. We're so busy. There are so many shows starting up all the time now. We're I don't know, it's ridiculous how busy it is right now. Like even I am trying to, crew, and I can't find crew already. You know what I mean? So I think it's really important that we do add some sort of training to our department through the union or producers. I don't know how it has to be set up, but I think it's a really important thing that needs to happen.
Okay. And so I want to kind of shift. Oh, go ahead, Sharon. I thought we lost you.
Just quickly, I know we shouldn't be starting this, but I saw in the chat that Carol Ramsey has been trying to also start a training program.
Yes, which
yeah.
I tried to do it for a very long time. Shout out to Carol. Hi, Carol.
Hey, Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
Yeah, I think it's something. She said we did it already. Yeah, I think it's something that as we go forward, we need to, I guess, amplify that and talk about the work that's happening there specifically, because it is important to get training, and have that be a way to, to come inside of the union, and then also to be, I guess, experienced enough, because that's the same thing. You guys are right. If you just throw someone in there and they don't have the experience, it actually makes it worse, because then the experience is worse. It's not going. So I think it is something that we need to go and look at. I want to ask you guys specifically about projects. So do you feel, or how do you feel about the projects you are offered versus the projects that you would like to pursue or be offered in the future? Because I know that that's something that happens, it's a thing. So who wants to talk about this one?
I can talk about it. It was really challenging for me to find projects that I connected to as a young designer, because, I started designing at a time where, this push and this pressure is happening, like Antoinette and Sharon are talking about. And so, I had representation, and they would literally send me any and every script that had Black leads in it. And, I love telling stories about the diaspora. It's, that's not the issue, but, I just felt like they didn't understand me as an artist, and they were just like, hey, we have a Black costume designer. We're going to send her every script we get that's Black, because they were feeling like a quota within the agency. And, it didn't feel good. It didn't feel like they took the time to get to know me and understand what I was trying to do, in my career. And then I also felt like on the flip side, when they would submit me for things, I wouldn't even get interviews a lot of times because, I was a Black designer. And that was also, interesting to experience, because, it made me feel like I was being pigeonholed, and there was this cap and this limit to what I could even interview for, or do. And, and even though up until that point, I had a diverse lineup of credits. I had done movies that had, non-people of color leads or white leads, and I had done different kinds of stories. I had done action movies, I had done dramedies, I'd done dark comedies. I had a diverse resume when I got that, was signed to that agency. But it didn't matter, because, I felt like once I got to LA, I got put into a box, and that was it.
When you guys are talking about even being put in that box, do you feel that often do you feel that they're giving you projects that you think would mimic life experience? Or do you feel like you're being given projects that sway outside of that? Because I think that is something where it's just you're offered the same projects consistently. Go ahead, Antoinette, and then Deidre.
It's twofold for me. I've had to flip both sides of the conversation, because my coming up in the industry in Canada, I was the first Black designer. So it was recommended not to have my visual, my face on IMDb, public, because 9 times out of 10, I walk into the room and they're surprised that I am a Black costume designer. And then when I moved a decade ago to the US, I'm told, quickly put up your face and show that you're a Black designer so that you can get work, because no one's going to offer you work in that's diverse because they look at their resume and assume you're a white designer. And these are facts. This is not Antoinette's personal opinion. This is what my representation's telling me. Mm-hmm. And it's really disheartening because at first I'm a costume designer first, but I want to be able to, as Charlize says, be able to work on the broader dysphoria based on what my artistic instinct leads to at that moment. But that is not the reality. The reality is you are sometimes, the color of your skin is seen first. Oh, she's a Black designer, so she wouldn't understand how to dress these characters. But yet everyone else is able to dress every character, So I'm not quite sure if I answered the question, but listening to Charlize and listening to you, I'm like, there's two sides to this conversation that I don't think everyone understands.
Go ahead, Deirdre. Nick Gersha.
I think we really need to speak the truth here, and it's called bias, unconscious and implicit bias. It's a real thing. It's a practice. And quite frankly, I feel that it is paramount that we, as designers, Black, brown, of color, step in and state our case out the gate. When I signed with my agency, my second agency, I was very clear. If you put me in a box, you will be sorely disappointed. My life experiences do not reflect the fact that I am Black. I am attracted to projects that speak to me first and foremost. And I think that is the most important thing. If you have those supports in place where they really see you, then they open the door to opportunity. And you personally, your relationships are the second tier, or sometimes the first. Yeah. I just feel I wasn't raised in a light to let my Blackness prevent me from doing anything that I chose to do. I was raised in a mindset that I could achieve whatever I wanted as long as I was diligent, focused, and I worked for it. Now, obviously, we'll get to this later. Things have changed. The dynamics are very different. But I do feel that it's important to speak your mind and say what you want. Ask for it. Because I do feel in some cases people are lazy. They'll make assumptions if you don't speak up. Agents will take the path of least resistance. But luckily for me, my agents, if they have been projects that are Black projects with Black protagonists, I specifically want those projects because those projects are the ones that speak to me. That doesn't mean that the project that is not Black leads or storylines do not. Those stories also speak to me. But I just make it a point of being very forward and not a supplicant and asking. I expect. And I think that's where the space that I sit in.
I love that. Gersha?
Yes, I agree with everything Deirdre just said. Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that I experienced was not being eligible for larger budget films. Like that's where I feel like my bigger problem hits right now. And even for Star Trek Discovery, I was not the designer hired to do the job. I sort of got it by, when the showrunner left, the designer left, and, lucky enough, Secret Hideout offered it to me at that time. But I wasn't the person chosen. I didn't go for an interview and get that job. I don't think I would have been considered. I may have, but I don't think so, because that was in 2016. And that is the thing. Like, I think, my largest budget film is like a $60 million film that I got because the director had worked with me previously, and he was a Black director. So other than that, I've never been able to interview or have the opportunity to get one of those larger budget films. Like I'd like to do $1 million projects, not just to do the number, but also those types of projects are really interesting. They come with a lot of other challenges. And, if you're doing, a cop show, a cop drama that's a $10 million drama, more than likely, or if you do like a $5 million drama, cop drama, you probably can do the bigger ones, because the reality is your budget was so small. You had to be so creative in the way that you were able to put that together. You know, it's a whole different ballgame. You get to really show your talents in that way. You know what I mean? It's like something you don't get to do when you're, you know, and it's just really frustrating. Before I did Star Trek, I was really frustrated. You know what I mean? And luckily that came to me, and I was able to do that. You know, and I've stepped in, and I've been there for 3 seasons. You know, and they continue on. But the bottom line is, you know, I would like to do a Star Trek feature. You know what I mean? Or Star Wars. You know, or you know, the fact that there's, you know, one big film, Black Panther, is the only like large budget. I mean, I'm sure Sharon's done some large budget films as well, but like the fact that Ruth was able to do that and took it the way where it went to, it just shows what's possible. Like, you know what I mean? We're all capable of that, but we don't get the opportunity. And the thing is that you always want to see that you've done it. You're always sort of held almost enslaved by your resume. You know what I mean?
This is true.
It's like you're stuck there. You can't go past that. So that's my thing. I'm just like, what do we do about that? How do we get ourselves out there? How do people know who we are and our talents and what we can do? Because we're all capable of doing any one of those films that are out there right now. So
Can I just piggyback off of what Gersha just said? I just had an experience where I was able to design my first studio film, and I was able to do it because the director and I had a previous working relationship, and he really, really, really fought for me because he knew I could do it. And, you know, the trailer came out and it looks amazing, and like, I couldn't be more thrilled. But I will say, I experienced so many microaggressions because it was my first studio film. Like, every single day, they were just so nitpicky over every single thing my department did. On top of it being, you know, a crime drama with period clothing that needed multiples and people getting shot, and me working in a city that had, you know, some resources, but it's not like I was working in LA or, you know, working in New York. I was in Cleveland in the Midwest, where there wasn't a lot going on. And so there was just like all this added stress and pressure of hiring a crew in a new city, and also designing a period, you know, crime drama in a new city. And on top of that, I would get threatened on the regular, you know, like, well, if you do this, you're never going to work and do a studio film again. Like, multiple times that happened to me on this project. And, you know, it was just really disheartening, because I was just like, I was hired to do a job because everyone knew I could do the job. And then once I get there, I'm being treated like they're doing me a favor. And so, you know, that was just really, really disheartening and disappointing. And I think that, like, the implicit bias is a thing, and that, you know, people really need to like check their biases and treat each other like colleagues. You know, like, we're colleagues. We're here to do a project together and make a project together and collaborate. And we should give each other the respect, no matter what we look like. If you're hired to do the job, like, we need to give each other the respect at the end of the day.
Here's something that I want to say too. Let me move to this, because I want to kind of bring this up since you guys brought it up, which was microaggressions, right? So because we're talking about that, and that is a term that everybody's using and kind of defining, I think it's important when we're talking about microaggressions to recognize that they are, you know, harmful, or they can cause harm to others. And so I wanted to ask you guys, what tools have you found that help with having positive conversations and success with diffusing situations, and in which your crew have felt the weight of microaggressions? So, because I think that sometimes microaggressions can get like kind of when you address them, they can get linked into the category of almost being like petty, like an annoyance, but they're not annoyances. They can be very harsh, and it's a lot of them over time. So have you guys found any tools to be able to start to deal with that within your own working environment? Go ahead, Deirdre.
I'll fall back into this conversation. I have really only experienced this in the latter part of, I'd say, the last few years. I started this business in 1994 from the ground up, right out of college. And I have to say, within, I say, the past 3 years, it has been extremely disquieting, and uncomfortable. And I'm talking everything from interviews, from when you get the job, and then when you interact with your director or your producer. Now, I'm not saying that has happened on every job, but I have one job in particular, which was also a studio film, that I had to constantly go back and understand that I had to go into work to do battle. Emotional battle, mental battle, warfare, dealing with passive aggressive behavior, dealing with gaslighting, dealing with undermining with your A-list star actor from a director, from a female director. And it was a situation that I had never, ever experienced, but it had far-reaching effects because I professionally stood up for myself. I articulated the situation with the producers who saw it happening in real time, who said, "Oh, you're handling this so well. We knew she was a little particular, but we just wanted you to know you're doing the right thing." But they did nothing. And the unfortunate part about microaggressions is that it's like death by 1,000 cuts. It's a paper cut that happens over and over and over again that will slowly kill you, will kill your creative process, will kill you creatively. You are not what we do is stressful enough, but when you enter into this space and you're trying to make sure you're on budget, your cast is happy, the look is right, you're being true to the script, true to everything, and you have these external forces of behaviors of people who unfortunately are not well versed and understanding how to deal with others, or they make assumptions on how to deal with people of color, especially Black people, it is damaging. And when you step out of that, you are left feeling, what did I do? What could I have done better? You're constantly replaying the events again to try and understand how you could be better. When you really clearly when you stood in the space of your truth and you were honest and professional and you did your job and you delivered the product on time, in budget, and there you go. So it's difficult. I just say recently, I'd say within the past 3 years, it's been intense.
Go ahead, Sharon. I also want to I saw Carol's asking a question.
Yeah, I want to address Carol's question too. I think Carol's question. Carol says that this is a common occurrence for everybody, which it is. And Deidre, like you said, it's been for me over the last 5 years. So I had to figure out, okay, I can as a human being. I've got to turn this around somehow. I got to figure out, first of all, it comes from the top. Usually it's a young director or a director who doesn't even have the experience to be doing the film because the studio doesn't want to pay for a seasoned director. And it all seems to come from the top. So my last strategy was when I had to observe really close to really understand all the players in the game. And then I used my crew I used other crews. I talked to the production designer and I got all the crews together. And we would have these like meetings because we were all being so brutally beaten down. And we all started a defense system for ourselves and to call them out. I mean, I'm not saying it made it that much better, but if you know somebody else is getting that same treatment, and basically it's because someone is not up to par on their own game and they're taking it out on the lower crew members, it's I guess it's just the way it is now, unless you have a more seasoned director. Even and I experience mostly in the higher budget films more than the lower budget films.
Go ahead, Antoinette. Thank you, Sharon.
Carol and Sharon is right. It happens to everyone. But if you're asking me on what differentiates it for me, my experience as a Black costume designer is when words such as, this is a good opportunity for people like you, or, you people. It's separating us out because he's not saying your department. He's not saying costumes. He's saying you people. And that's the difference, is when we are when we are isolated as a race, if I can be specific.
Yes.
And this is a good opportunity for you. And hold on a minute. This is not the biggest budget film I've done. This is not the biggest cast. And you insinuating that it shifts the conversation. And all of a sudden now I'm feeling uncomfortable. And that's the difference. It's starting to feel uncomfortable in my skin. Whereas I didn't think about the fact that this problem that we're addressing is a universal costume problem. We're in a small town. We don't have the resources. This is what I need. Well, Buttercup, figure it out because this is a good opportunity for you. I also want to say to him, well, I've been doing this longer than you've been an adult, but hey.
And that as well. I think the key really is to define the differences, because I know that everybody experiences these little things. Go ahead, Charlize.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, for me, the differences are working in mostly white departments and seeing how people get treated, and the designers got treated in those departments. And not all the white designers I worked with had these long resumes. Some of them, it was like their first project. And they weren't treated how I get treated now that I'm a designer, and that's for me is like the difference. And I come to work, knowing my stuff. I come to work like with my research, with my boards, do amazing presentations, and it's still not enough. You know what I mean? It's still like, my department's getting accused of all kinds of like asinine things. And I'm like, I'm like, why is this so so aggressive and so hard, and I'm like, I don't remember having any of these experiences when I worked in other departments where I was like the only Black person in the department. I don't remember everything being so brutally scrutinized in this way. And
let's define this, because this is actually leading into a question I wanted to ask, which is there's the concept of weaponization of Blackness. That does happen. It's been a long-standing conversation. So I think it's one of those things where do you feel as though you've been judged by a different standard than your PLC counterparts? Please explain that and give context.
I don't necessarily feel that I'm being judged harder, because I lead with my professional experience and also my educational background. I mean, I was taught never to dim my light. However, unfortunately, you are in a different environment where it makes them uncomfortable. It makes some directors who are just starting out uncomfortable that they were probably born when you started this business and that you understand your department well. So instead of creating an environment of antagonism, I really use the opportunity to educate, to share, to teach. I try to bridge and diffuse anything out the gate. But what I lead with is my background and my pride and how I've come through this business. And what I walk away with is that I want to just step into the room and try to make the space a better space and educate someone else along the way so they can I guess what I'm trying to say is I make every effort to diffuse. Mm-hmm. It's a constant diffuse, make you comfortable, all of that, which is also a burden, because why do I have to do that?
Okay, so that's the other question then, because I'll go back and like my question thought process. Let's talk about what that is, which is code switching. So do you feel like, if anyone wants to kind of take that and define what that means?
I'll start out. And to piggyback off of what Antoinette says, the name, I just had a comment that came up that one of my colleagues who's also rep by my agency was having a conversation with her agent, and she said, oh, I'm speaking with Deirdre Govan, we're on this panel together, yada, yada, yada. And she goes, wait a minute, she's Black? So I find myself often challenged at times to where I'm having conversations. This is before Zoom or even just on the phone with directors or producers. They have no idea who I am. And then when they meet me, the first thing that they say, which is very hard, is that, oh, you're so articulate and well-spoken.
Yes.
I'll yield and let everyone else weigh in on that. But
go ahead.
And Antoinette Missam, hello. The name alone from Canada. And then, oh, you're Black. Oh, you're Jamaican. You don't sound or look like a Jamaican. And that is before the conversation starts about, can we lead it back to the conversation, the topic at hand, which is discussing this character or this show. But they're still stuck on who walked through the door. And it's code switching. Let's talk about overcoming that hump in an interview when they see you for the first time and you're not who they expected. And then you have to not just sell your ideas and what you bring to the table, but you have to help them change their reaction to who they thought they were getting or were meeting with. And it's like, it's so much work, you know? Sharon wants to jump on that.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Sharon.
I so agree with both these ladies. And for the years since the 90s, I've been doing this, and it's so unconsciously done by me that when the Black Lives Matter movement came out, I about crumbled. I thought, oh my God, I've been somebody else for how many years? But I have to play luckily I majored in acting, because the person that is at work and the person that is at home are two different people. Correct. And I usually have a diverse crew, but, majority of white people. And I have to, I feel like I have to be 100% aware of everybody's feelings at all times. That leaves me with people go, why do you work on the weekend? Well, that is the only time I can be creative, because the other time I'm being a psychiatrist. Or I'm just trying to muddle through a world that I really don't feel like has been designed for me to be creative in.
I feel like that's something, I want everybody to speak on this, but I just want to say, I think it's relatable, and it's something that your crews or people even here might not know that we deal with as people of color or as Black people at work. It's something that is unspoken, but you get home and you just relax and you're just like, I can kind of be myself. I'll just tell a story real quick, then we'll go to Charlize, which was, I remember one of the first days I worked with Ruth on Black Panther, and I'm sitting in my office and her office was next to mine. And she turned on some music. She turned on like Earth, Wind, and Fire or something. And like in my soul, I was sitting in my office and I was like, this is different. This feels nice. Like I felt like I could be myself at work for the first time in a really long time, where I just felt like, oh, okay, I felt welcomed there. So it's a different feeling. And I think everybody needs to be aware of that. Go ahead, Charlize.
I just kind of wanted to touch on like both code switching and weaponizing Blackness. I've definitely had conversations with like my crew that might be all Black or mostly Black, and be like, we can't F up. Like, we don't have any room to make any mistakes. Like, we have to be perfect, And like, and it sucks because I know this because of the experiences that I've had, like it just throughout my entire life, where like I have to be an exceptional Black person to be accepted as a human being, and it's a lot, because we're talking about how stressful our jobs are, and then on top of that, like you can't make any mistakes, or you feel like you can't make any mistakes because there's no room, for you to make a mistake, because that may mean you never get considered, or hired again, going back to what I said earlier about how I was threatened by a production supervisor almost every day, about the most asinine things, which weren't against studio policy or any of that. Like, we weren't doing anything, wrong. It just wasn't to his liking. So he would threaten me and threaten my department, to the point where my wardrobe supervisor couldn't handle it. And I had to bring someone else in because it was causing her distress, because she was a white woman and she never had to deal with this kind of stuff before. But because I was a Black designer, our department was so highly scrutinized, it was affecting her mental health, And I'm just like, girl, this is just what happens. You just push through, And it took that moment for me to realize, oh my God, this isn't normal. Because she's having breakdowns over how he's speaking to her. And I'm just like, okay, whatever. I just have to be exceptional so he stops. So
instead of actually like address, it's almost like you feel the need to even push forward even more. Go ahead, Deidre, and then Antoinette.
The bottom line is, I just want to create.
Yeah.
I want to create. I want to create these worlds. I want to exist in a place of peace and play my music, do my sketches, do my research, do my boards, the things that I've seen designers that I've worked with over the years, the freedom that they have, that ability to express. That doesn't mean that they don't have problems. We all have problems on shows. It's the art of the game of working in this business. But when you come through the door by default and you are levied and burdened with stressors for being Black, it adds another component to your creative process,
right. Which
at times, if you are not psychologically able or have the ability, those tools to deal with, it's not easy. So in addition to already working in a very strenuous, stressful business and always having to be on your A game and above A, it's not easy. But at the same time, I feel that we're all here because we're survivors. We have persevered and we will continue to do so. But I think there's a certain power and grace in what we do and also who we are. So it's not an easy thing, but we just do it.
I think that you guys are touching on some stuff that I really like, which is it's good to share the experience, but also I find, especially with everything that's been going on and like how all the conversations that we've been having, it is important to share that I think we have so many little subliminal things that we deal with as Black people that we're so used to doing. It's a part of our experience. And that we may talk to each other about it, or like you come home and your spouse or whoever is there and you're just like, this is what happened to me today at work. But we never actually express those things because it's like we're also trying to be professional. So you're trying to be professional. You're trying to make sure that you're not causing discord or chaos in your department. But there are conversations that I'm starting to notice that we're all having too as we move forward, where the little, like something that could be like a little thing that might happen that you kind of dismiss. Now people are actually saying something about it. So it's like if someone wants to come and then put their hands in Charlize's hair, that's it. But that's a thing. It's a thing. But when you're at work, you're also not trying to be perceived a certain way. But now it's kind of like we're in the place where it's just like, no, don't do that.
It's definitely happened to me. And you know what I've actually started doing when people touch my hair? I start playing and touching it with their hair and they stop and they're like, and I'm like, yeah, it doesn't feel good, right? Yeah. It's weird.
Got it. Go ahead, Antoinette.
It's hard to follow you and Deidre. That was great. But I just wanted to add the code switching, because that is such a thing that people don't understand, because, there are, and I see it coming from Canada, the code switching is the difference between an island, you call it island, we're West Indians. West Indians are predominantly what make up Ontario, where I grew up. And then here it's African American, and then there's Latino. And the thing is, we may come with an accent, or we may come with cultural makeup that is not North American, but the reaction to how we speak, our tone, our body language. I like to dance. I have a dance background. It makes me happy. I like to play music. And I find that I have to adapt or think about my cadence when I speak, because, I spoke to Gersha about this recently. Coming from Jamaica with a heavy accent, I had to be taught and learn how to enunciate and speak clearly and and with conviction that I'm clear. Because when I speak normally amongst my friends and family, 50% of you wouldn't understand what I'm saying. But it's taken as a negative, as a directness, a forcefulness, an aggressiveness, which in speaking to a friend's husband who's married a Canadian and been to Toronto many times now, he's like, wow, I didn't realize you West Indians, you guys talk differently. And that's having to tone that or change that or adapt that to make my crew or production comfortable is what code switching defines for me. Well, that I'm not able to be myself.
I want to
naturally.
I would like to talk about this because this is something that just brought up too, which is just a quick aside to talking about that. How many of you guys, if you know, answer, have been, your crew's first Black female boss? Like where specifically. So see, that's also another layer to that experience too, which is I think I remember I don't think I personally had a Black teacher until I was in college. I think that's something visually, even when you just something that feels different, is trying to kind of figure out, even within your crews, some of you have been your first, your crew's first Black boss. I think that's something that also kind of speaks to how we're interacting with each other on a daily basis. I want to switch gears a little bit. But first, I'll answer this question first before I switch, which is, there's a broad range of generations on this panel, just in terms of what you guys are experiencing. Based on your experience, how has the topic of race affected you in the workplace? Because I think this is a question that will be answered differently depending on where you jumped in.
In the workplace, I think I am looked to a lot of times if I am not the department head, especially earlier in my career as a PA or coordinator, ACD, shopper. If I'm the only Black woman in the department, I'm looked to for just the Black experience. I get asked the craziest questions when I just want to work, and I'm just like, what's my shopping list for the day? And then it's like, well, what, how do you do your hair? And, does it take a long time? And, and I'm just like, why are we talking about this? That, I think that was how I was affected the most when I was, working in departments where I was the only one. That, and also being largely ignored, not being invited, to have drinks with people, and just, just being my brain being picked about, various things, and, being given more responsibilities than were of my job title, because I was a Black person. So I must know about these Black things. And that's outside of my job description, and I'm not getting credit for that, So I think those were the ways where I was affected the most by race. I mean, there have been some things that have happened, but it's mainly been outside of the costume department. I've had Teamsters say some not so great things about Black people around me, so and I've had to address things because I have no problem addressing them. I don't care who you are. I was raised to be direct and to let people know, I know, even if they're trying to be subtle and be funny, I know what you're saying. I know what you mean, and I'm just grateful that I was raised that way with that knowledge to understand when someone's trying to be slick and underhanded and say racist things. So, I think in addition to the conversation I was having earlier about feeling like being put in a box when I was working in departments, that was largely the ways where I felt, my race the most.
I think for me, my experience has been interesting because I was having this conversation with Antoinette actually the other day as well, is the fact that I feel like I'm desensitized. When we moved to Canada, we moved to a small town, Lanigan, Saskatchewan, and we were the only Black family. It was population 1,000. So we had a lot of racial slurs, we had to go through all that kind of those experiences. And then So having gone through that and then moving to Toronto and starting my career as a costume designer, I do feel like I've sort of developed like a wall around me where a lot of that stuff doesn't affect me. So I'm sort of, I think in some ways it sort of hardened me a little bit. And one of the things I realized when this whole Black Lives Matter came up was how I started remembering all of those things and all the things that have happened in my career that I've gone through. And, and also some things I used to think was an advantage, like going shopping with an assistant designer and the assistant designer getting approached and me not getting approached, or even being in a meeting and the assistant designer gets approached, I don't get approached. And at some point I used to think, okay, that's great. I could do, when I was in the store, I could do what I needed to do. But now I was realizing that, all of those things, I've been giving away my power, giving away who I am. And they sort of like, this idea of not being good enough and all of these things that we go through, it's like those were all sort of cementing that for me. And I was just allowing that to happen. So it's been a really interesting journey, this last part, and just about understanding what all that meant for me and what I want to do going forward and who I want to be going forward. So that's just, in my experience, that's how I feel right now. I think it's a really interesting time for all of us.
Go ahead, Deirdre.
Just repeat the question once again for me.
Just based on your experience, how's the topic of race affected you in the workplace? So
I would say it's very interesting times. Something Gersha just said triggered something for me. My assistants are not Black, and that's not by design. That just happens to be the relationships that I've built with people over time. And often when I'm out shopping, my assistant is mistaken for the costume designer. And they will talk over me to speak to my assistant. And it has happened not just in stores, it's happened in production meetings. First, production meetings, people introduce themselves, they defer to the costume department, and the next thing you know, they're looking at my assistant. So I would say there are times that when I see that happen, I stand very quietly because I know the people that I surround myself with. And my team is very quick to correct and say, she's the one you want to talk to. So for me, it's about also who you surround yourself with. Your support team is very important, be they of your own race or not. But it's important to know that you have a team that has your back and understands the rules of the game and how this is played. Because if you're not careful, you exist in this space of being undermined in varying ways. So it's interesting, but that's all I'm going to say on that.
Go ahead, Sharon, and then Antoinette.
I just briefly want to agree with both you ladies, and Gersha, the same thing with me, that the whole awakening, I can't believe it took this long. Yeah. And also I usually have a white assistant, and in Atlanta, if we go into the store, they ask for 1 million IDs from me. They asked nothing of her.
Yeah.
And you're right, Gersha. I thought in my head, okay, well, I'll just go shop while she goes and is a front person. But no longer. This is so.
It's almost like we have to be. You have to be very secure in who you are, because if you're not, that could really again play a psychological dance on your mind. Well, and that's why it's so important to have a very strong team that has your back, that really can support you, because it's the worst feeling when that happens and you victimize yourself over and over again. Yeah. But again,
exactly. But most of my ACDs have been supportive of me, so they're not trying to take advantage. But before, I did have people that would definitely take advantage.
Go ahead, Antoinette.
Talk about triggering. Right? It's, just in a nutshell, I read something recently when someone says, oh my God, all this hysteria over Black Lives Matter, and not understanding not only the triggers that it brings to you, and bringing up things that you buried or you just rolled with and kept on moving. Like you're asked to put your bag at the door, but your assistant is not. Mm-hmm. And you just keep going because that's become almost normal Do you know what I mean? And the few times that you do bring attention to it and say, hold on a minute, then you're the angry Black woman, you know? So you can't, it's either, do you want to stop your day and your flow and your creativity by addressing someone's racism, or do you just move on? Yeah. And sometimes what our crew doesn't understand is that, you know, they don't understand that not only are you having to address that elephant in the room, being at a production meeting or being on your truck and a producer walking in who's not met you and assuming your trailer person is the costume designer, which happens all the time, you know what I mean? But the fact that you are being hired to be creative, you're being hired to design a movie, you're being hired to develop a look for this beast while you're dealing with all that bullshit. And you know what? We're human. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it hurts. Sometimes you're hoping that someone in your team understands and is supportive, and not just assuming because you're upset or angry that they have time, they have an attitude, they're aggressive. How about the fact that I just got rolled over by someone who officially should be speaking to me creatively, but they don't even see me? How do you think that makes me feel? But yet, got to rise to the occasion, people. We got a job to do. I've got 40 people here. We got to keep it moving. We go to camera the next day. And so what if the second AD just dismissed me in front of my entire department? I got to be the bigger person. So all I'm saying to all of you panelists is recognize that sometimes there's more to this. There's more to, you know what, Antoinette really had a hard time getting out of bed this morning because I'm thinking about the fact that I've got to take it on again, and I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm tired of fighting that fight, which we're here speaking to today, what that fight is.
Thank you, Antoinette.
Add something last minute to what Antoinette said. Right. Not many of us designers, Black designers, have the privilege of working with a director or a showrunner consistently that has your back. That's a very rare opportunity. And when you are afforded that opportunity, there's some type of insular environment that you have because that person who it's their show, they're the director, they have your back. So I feel for those of us who don't have those opportunities or who have not experienced what it's like to be carried in your career by the same director or showrunner over time, it's very different. The vision is skewed. When you have that opportunity to work with that actor, that A-list actor who can request you time and time again, or that director and that producer, it's different because it's automatic. You have the respect, you have that safety, you have that protection, and you can create. I've only experienced this recently with a showrunner who I did a film with and who now I've done 2 shows with. And there is a difference. There is a difference when you have that because you know that you have that ability, an open door policy to talk creatively, to speak freely, but it's rare. So I just think that's something also we should share with the audience is that, you know, that opportunity for some of us who are costume designers is not often one that's afforded to many, but to few.
I want to add this in here just because I feel like it's important. Go ahead, Sharon, and then I'll add. Go ahead. Okay, I do want to say, because it's the elephant in the room too, as we're talking about this, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about pay. Do you guys feel that there's a pay gap between you and non-POC designers? Who wants to go ahead, Gersha?
I was going to say, not only is there a pay gap, but there's also, you know, the favored nations contract, which we talked about with Sharon and gave us some good tips. And I went to negotiate my contract, and, you know, the contract points about travel, et cetera, et cetera. And I've been working in the industry already for 20 years at that point, and had established certain precedences in my contract. And one of them is business class travel. And on that particular show, I traveled more than I've ever traveled. You know, I traveled to LA 5 times before we went to camera. I traveled to London I had to go to Switzerland. I went to, we shot in Jordan. You know what I mean? I was just going, I was always somewhere, flying somewhere, it felt like. And they would not give me business class travel when they went to negotiate my contract. So it was a fight. I almost got fired. Literally, I was in Jordan, and it's like 4:00 in the morning, and my producer, who is a Black producer, and I'm going to say everything, and he's calling me and saying, do you want to stay on the show? Because, this could be the end of it here. And so he talked me into staying, because I was like, I'm fighting for this part. You know what I mean? I want my business class travel, which sounds ludicrous, but just in the fact of working my way up to that already and having that set as a precedent and then having it taken away just felt so wrong. It just, it just felt like they weren't seeing me. And that was a big thing for me. So
Sharon and then Antoinette.
Gersh, it's so important to get that business class or that first class, simply because, we get enough of it on set with, when I come on set, usually the first day of the shoot, the AD, doing the parking tells me the extras parking is over there. Or, I have crew members saying, Sharon, why aren't you getting upset about that? And it's like, I am upset, but because I'm a Black woman, I can't be like, if I get loud, it's what Antoinette said, then I'm a loud, angry Black woman. But third of all, I need that travel. I need that first class or business so I can rewind and have people respect me. Because if I'm sitting in the back, once again, I'm labeled, and I need, at least on that flight, to feel like I am the costume designer. If that's the only place I can get it, then let me have it.
And I want to jump in on that, because I experienced only one occasion where I had a producer, and it was about pay, and it was for a film, where I found out that the DP was getting full travel, full per diem, housing, car, and I did not. And what was most upsetting is when I found out that it was a quote unquote favored nations deal, as Sharon and Gersha have spoken about. He told me, he said, no, you're not going to get that. I only have to pay you a penny more to be within scale and union rule. I was devastated. I've never, ever experienced anything like that before. But what I can say is what Sharon and Gersha are saying is right. We have to eliminate the feelings that we have walking through the door and ask for what we want, because our counterparts are getting it without question. Even if they have to fight, we all have to fight, regardless of whatever race we are. But we have to demand it. And that's the unfortunate part about designing while Black, is that we have to ask, as opposed to, okay, it's a given, which is the sad part.
I'd like to, sorry, go ahead, Antoinette.
I'm sorry, and I apologize, Sharon. I didn't mean to cut you there, but Gersha forgot a very, very important part of her story that is relevant, because I was aware of this happening at the time. She forgot to say that everyone else that was a head of department was put in business class. That is very important. Not only the production designer and the DOP, but the stunts. And I mean, the list went on. So they all went to the left, and she alone went to the right. So let's be clear on that point. That's very important to state. You forgot that, Gersha.
Yes, I did. And the camera crew, because 867, I believe the local is in Toronto, they all travel business class if they're traveling more than 3 hours on a flight.
Yeah. Yes. So to add to this, twice in my career, the pay equity has hit me hard in terms of it being very clear that people like me were being given an opportunity. And the first time, even though we fought it for a long time, I took it because I was already on the job, working. And it was a really, really important career move, but also in terms of wanting to work with this director who I respected his vision and wanted to be part of whatever he was working on, because it spoke to me and my truth and my background. But to find out once on the job that I was correct and that my rate was below scale, and unacceptable. And this is an accountant telling me this. What was disheartening, because I believed the above a line when they're saying, everybody's working for scale. And it was a mid-tier film. It wasn't a low budget. It wasn't a high budget. It was, in the 30 plus range. And my rate would have been less than the lowest paid person in my department. And it hurt, because again, I'm being asked to be the best I can be without feeling valued.
Right.
So when it happened again, where I'm hired on a film, and even though I was told many, many times that you're very fortunate to be given this opportunity, we could have hired Oscar-nominated, Oscar-winning designers for this project. They were interested. I was still given a solid rate, a decent rate, but when the film came back, it was dropped. The rate was dropped considerably. And it took several months with actually at the point where I'm saying, not this time, I'm ready to walk, because it meant that much to me to be respected and be paid, if even close to on par with people working on the same level films with my experience. And to be told within production that I wasn't, was really, really hard. And I know that as a community, costume designers, and I can only speak for costume designers because I know the illustrators are doing it differently, have been open and supportive and enlisting and talking about their rates and backing each other. We costume designers have to figure out how to do that. We have to start setting a standard for ourselves and our peers that we don't lowball, or we feel comfortable that we can reach out to each other and say, hey, you work for this studio on this same level budget. What did they give you? Because, your agents will fight for you and they'll do their thing, but sometimes it's helpful to know what that person did on the last project or got on the last project.
Go ahead, Sharon, and then Shirley's.
I think it would be helpful not just to have the rate of what someone made, but more importantly, how much the budget was and then how much they made. Maybe we could just do a thing like that and send it out to everybody so they know where they should be at this size of a budget.
I think it would be helpful for you guys to have something like that, especially because you all are stronger together. And I think that when you think about broader conversations, when we just talk about our jobs on a whole, the one thing is like, you guys, you've seen it. You can sit and have the same conversation with people all day long where you can like, oh yeah, and this and this and this and this and this. So there's a commonality there. There's a bond. But the key thing is trying to turn that bond into some kind of action, which is just like, okay, we recognize that this is a problem. Let's try to figure out how to actually get it to where we can stop it or solve it. And I think that specifically comes from working together. Go ahead, Deidre.
I shared this before in our group, but this is, as also a costume designer, I'm a production designer, and this is something that the art department is very comfortable in doing. Transparency of rates, transparency of kits, transparency of all of your deal points. And I don't know why it exists in the realm of costumes, why this is such a difficult thing for costume designers to share information. It's a behavioral change that I think is needed. I've sat in rooms and conversations with costume designers who would never dream of sharing how they negotiate their rates, how they negotiate their deals, if they're negotiating a licensing deal based upon the work that they do. It is, someone got really outraged and left the room because they were like, it's none of your business. This is what I do. And for me, that mentality continually perpetuates why we as costume designers, no matter Black, white, Latinx, whatever, why we are consistently undermined in our rates as a whole. Now, that I'm not going to make a general statement and say that's all of us. There are several costume designers who have been able to break through and transcend that ceiling. But I really feel to raise the floor unilaterally for everyone to really achieve pay equity, transparency is the only way.
Transparency.
There's a lot of ego involved in all that too. So I remember at one CDG meeting, maybe 10 years ago, my agent actually spoke about rates. So sometimes it's great to get agents in because they do know points better than we do. And they know more pay scales. So perhaps we could get a Zoom with some agents and they can give us some.
That would be game changing. I think that's really important, Sharon.
Go ahead, Charlize, and then we're going to wrap it after because we only got 5 minutes left. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I just wanted to say, as the youngest person here, building my career over the last 10 years, I have found more often than not when I am being presented with, projects about the diaspora with Black leads, it's been a lot of non-union and very low budget projects. And, it's really hard for, young Black designers and Black designers who are even further along in their careers, who have longer careers than me, if we're only being offered these, projects because we're Black and they're not putting money into our stories, it's really, really hard, to be able to negotiate and ask for the same pay as, I have, white costume designer friends whose, budgets have been considerably higher than mine, from the beginning of their careers because more money is being put into, white, quote unquote, white shows. I don't know how else to say it. So that's also an issue that I've personally faced. And I know that's not necessarily something that we can, tackle as costume designers, but I think it is important to note that a lot of times, the projects that are about the diaspora, about Black people, about people of color, the studios and, production companies are not putting money into them. So it's really, really hard, when you are trying to transcend to a different level in your career to even do that because you're not trusted to be able to manage a bigger budget. So, that's also a huge part of the pay disparity from my perspective. And I've had similar experiences to everyone where, I'm working on I'm negotiating a deal, my agent negotiating a deal, and I'm asking my agent what his other clients' rates are who have similar resumes, who are, working in the similar budget realm. And I'm being told I should be grateful, that I'm getting even that much. And I'm like, huh? That, why am I not getting, the same? If this is what other people are getting, based off of what my agent's telling me about his other clients, and they're not, Oscar nominated, Oscar winning, they're just like me, they're working costume designers. So, there's a lot of the, you should be grateful that happens to us when we're negotiating our rates. And that's just not right, in my opinion.
Now, quickly, because we're just at the end of this, I want each of you to give a little sign off or something that you would like to, impart on our audience today. So I'm going to start with Gersha. Go, Gersha, go.
Great. I think what I'd like to impart on our audience, I think that, as Black costume designers, we're here, we're good, we're talented, we've all been putting in our time and doing what we do. And I think that that's, we just want to be seen, I guess, is what it really boils down to. We want to be seen and we want to be part of the picture because we are here and we're doing the jobs, and it would be just great to be counted in and, maybe be recognized and get opportunities. We're having a hard time getting in and getting opportunities. And I think that's a big thing, that it would be nice to be able to have some of those things. There were a couple of union things I also wanted to say. I think it would be great to have, the union I think is great, but I think one of the things that would be great is if they were more open to different legislation, opening up to different legislation and different ideas in terms of how we can fix some of these issues that we're dealing with in terms of inequalities and just diversity issues. I think that's it for now.
Hey, Deidre.
Wow. I'd say we need to get proximate with each other. As one of my dear friends and someone who I've worked with, Brian Stevenson, has often said, to know each other, you need to get proximate. You need to understand each other. You need to listen with compassion and an open heart and an open mind. That's how you make change happen. And the last thing I'll leave everyone with is that we need to get in good trouble. And I think those of us who know who has recently passed knows what that means. We need to really change the game and work together. And that's what I'll lead with.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Deidre took my words, put them in her eloquent way of speaking, and I.
And Antoinette?
I said something recently to Charlize that I am so happy for her that her film that's just coming out now, the trailer is fantastic, kudos to you, is coming out now, that maybe more people will watch it. Yeah. There's nothing more disheartening for me that there's so much incredible work that comes out that we make because we're asked to do them, or we get hired to do them, that people don't watch those kind of films. And, a very well-respected costume designer said to me that Superfly was fantastic. The fact that you're able to do that type of diverse film, but I couldn't vote for you because I don't watch movies like that. So, give us a chance. Look at our work. It'd be nice to know that, our work is equally seen and recognized when the time comes around, like everyone else's. So it goes back to, we'd like to be seen. Thank you.
No problem. And Charlize?
I would just like to say to everyone who attended and who's watching, thank you so much for being here. And I just hope that, you can take some of the things that you've heard from us and talk to people in your lives, other people in the costume department about checking these implicit biases that you have, and doing that work, because that's the only way we're going to be able to come together and be able to work together more effectively, is if we come to each other and we look at situations for what they are, and we look at people for who they are and what they're bringing to the table, and not making assumptions on the onset, because you had an experience with someone at some point who looked like me, that I'm going to be the exact same way. Everyone needs to give each other the benefit of the doubt. And I think Black people and people of color especially need to be given the benefit of the doubt because of how much stereotyping, and how much of this stuff is ingrained in people's minds, because of media, honestly, because of television, a lot of times, because of film. And, and that's the work that, I do. I try my best to not work on projects that perpetuate a lot of that stuff, So I just think everyone can take away from this, please check yourselves. I have to check myself on my biases. We all have them. So, I think it would be wonderful if everyone took that away today.
And I want to thank everybody for coming to this panel and this discussion. It's the first of many that we plan on having with the CDG. I also want to take the time to thank Dana Woods, the head of our CDG Diversity Committee. And I just want to encourage you guys all to continue to have conversations. They help so much. Get awkward, be weird, have the conversations, be upset, be whatever, as long as you're having the conversation to move things forward. It's desperately needed. Try not to be polarized. We're all going in directions like this. The best thing that you can do at this point is to have a conversation to where you kind of find the middle. And I think that that's something that I want to encourage everybody to do. So as we move forward, make sure that you can find the middle, find compromise, and depending on what side you're on with this, make sure that everyone is listening to each other. The costume department is a mighty department. I've been blessed to be in the costume department now for 13 years. It's my 13th year, and working around, a plethora of people, primarily women. And I think that even with me being male and being in the costume department, I do see the disparities even more so because I can pick them out and notice them. So it's something that we all need to work on to change. So I want to thank everyone again for coming and appreciating that we had this discussion. And thanks to our panelists for you guys giving your, insight. And I want to encourage everybody to come to our continuing discussions that we'll have within the future. So thanks, everybody. Thank you very much. Good job.
Thank you.
No problem. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.